Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of MyArtBroker Talks, hosted by me, Erin Atlanta Argan. Today I'm joined by Carrie Carnier, who is the creative director at Iconic Images. And if you didn't know, Iconic Images is a fantastic gallery and archive containing historic and indeed iconic photographs from the worlds of fashion, film, rock and pop, politics, and even royalty. Iconic represents some of the world's leading photographers. They organise international exhibitions, publish books containing gorgeously printed photographs, and they also resource editorial image licensing for magazines and other publications. I'm so delighted to have you join us today, Carrie.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. And today we're going to be discussing the big question that crosses over both of our worlds in prints and editions and also photography. What makes an image iconic?
It's such a good question, isn't it? I get asked that all the time.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, when as somebody in the arts world, somebody who, goes in and out of galleries and loves and consumes art, what is iconic to you?
I think, honestly, it's that perfect blend of the time that the artwork was made, the subject matter and the artist all coming together to kind of capture the zeitgeist of the era.
Yeah.
For me. What about you?
Well, I think it is that old phrase, isn't it? Every picture tells a story. And I think in many ways, that's why photography, is kind of leading the charge a bit in the collector world, because there's an immediacy. You have a reaction to that image, and that image springs to mind a story. There's a narrative behind that photo. And whether that's a photo of Elton John or Brigitte Bardot or a gorgeous landscape or street photography. So, behind every image is that story. It's who, when, where, why, how. And I think photography, when it all works together and all comes together, it becomes iconic.
For sure. And I think that that's a beautiful comparison to like MyArtBroker, where we work in prints and editions, where it's kind of, the artist thinking about their idea, whereas photography being very much a literal snapshot of an iconic moment.
And it's more than that, just little snapshot, isn't it? Because of the uniqueness of iconic images. So we not only represent, nearly 40 photographers, and they're, from some of the greatest photographers of the 20th century, such as Eve Arnold or Terry O'Neill or Norman Parkinson, but also some, great exciting new photographers like Charles Moriarty. So behind every single image that can be rolls and rolls of film that you've never seen. So it's not only that one image, it's that selecting of that one image. It's why that one image, why that image as opposed to that other image on the same contact sheet. And that's kind of the, how do I say, the joy of the job, is just the discovery of images behind images behind images.
Yeah, and we see the same thing with things like Andy Warhol's trial proofs and artist proofs, where you have, your amazing Marilyn, the print that comes out at the end of it. But before that, you have trial proofs, artist proof, printer's proof, which are all these, technical workings out of what makes the perfect image and how you get to that final iconic image.
Yeah, and it's trial and error. I mean, the same as is true in photography, and whether or not that photo worked that size. And you also have to remember that the majority of the photographers that we know and love and collect today did not take photos thinking, I'm going to be in a museum. They were working photographers. They were working for some of the best magazines in the world. And that can be from Life or Look or Vogue, Queen, Harper's, even Town and Country, GQ, etc., who had and gave great space to great photographers to allow them to work. And so what you would pick for a magazine, for a newspaper, for a cover of a magazine, is not necessarily what you would hang on the wall. And the same at music. You know, so if you're working with Elton John or David Bowie or the Rolling Stones, you know, maybe you're shooting for the album cover. Maybe you're shooting for the inside sleeve or a tour program or even flyers to promote a tour. Those might not then be the best images on that roll that might work as fine art. So every image, in many ways, you know, there's a purpose for every image I think the photographer aims to take.
Yeah, for sure. I'd also just like for you to tell us a little bit more about Iconic Images and what you do there. I know about Iconic Images because I'm a friend of Terence Pepper from my MA, but I'd just love it if you could tell us a bit more about the gallery and how long it's been there and your role in it.
No, we're so lucky that Terence Pepper consults with us. You know, Terence, you know, ran the photography department at the National Portrait Gallery for many decades, and really doesn't get the credit he is due for revolutionizing the photography market in many ways, and also treating celebrity photography, and I mean that in terms of the subjects, as important museum worthy imagery. You
Mm.
know, you go into the National Portrait Gallery today, you pay X amount of dollars to see an incredible exhibition of Paul McCartney's work. We have Terence Pepper to thank for that.
Yeah.
Even though he wasn't involved in that show, he was the one that really opened those doors. So a big shout out to Terence Pepper. Iconic Images started about a dozen years ago, really on the basis of Terry O'Neill and his archive. Terry O'Neill was one of the great photographers of the 20th century, started in the early 1960s, taking photos of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and really capturing that zeitgeist of what the swinging 60s would become, and helped visually define that important groundbreaking decade. He went on in the 70s to do very similar work with amazing relationships with Brigitte Bardot, Michael Caine, Audrey Hepburn, David Bowie, Elton John, Led Zeppelin, just to name a few. And then when he started to retire, you know, as luck had it, Terry kept a lot of his negatives. So he had boxes and boxes and boxes of negatives. And, you know, a long story short, he became, you know, probably one of the most exhibited fine art photographers, easily the recent decade, where he would sell prints that are signed and numbered in limited editions. And people loved it. And I think people loved it because they loved meeting Terry. They
Mm.
loved hearing the stories behind Terry's greatest works. And that was the genesis of Iconic Images.
Amazing. And also you've now moved into the lovely gallery space in Waterloo Place. That was quite a recent move, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we were finally granted sort of the ability to open a flagship gallery in Piccadilly. So we're only about 3 minutes from Piccadilly Circus in this amazing showcase, gorgeous building that just shows photography in such a new light. And we're able to do exhibitions and openings and book signings and really just kind of introduce people to the world of photography and how photography can work on your walls, whether it be a beginning collector or a seasoned collector.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really lovely things about the gallery because I don't really see that many galleries in London that are dedicated solely to photography, at least not on the same scale that you guys are. And I've been lucky enough to visit the archive a couple of times and kind of see the breadth of the collection that you guys have. I'm also just wondering, I know that you sell the artworks in the gallery, but what is this market like for photographs?
I mean, because we are the owners of the Terry O'Neill Archive, Eva Serini, Ed Kareff, Garrett Mankiewicz, and Ted Williams, and we then represent several photographers exclusively, such as Norman Parkinson and Michael Joseph. We are able to source all galleries globally with fine art prints. So we're a little bit of the home base for
Mm.
many of the photographers that we are lucky enough to represent. Um, and the market, it's growing, and it's wonderful, because what works in LA might not work in Miami, and what somebody in New York loves, someone in Oslo might want something else. So we have the ability to kind of service a global market, a changing marketplace, from new clients to old clients, for clients who want something big and a statement, to someone who's looking for something a little more intimate. We are very much a a one-stop shop. And
Mm.
that, I think, is kind of I don't know, the beauty of iconic images, is that, you could almost name any celebrity in the last 100 years. It is likely I have it.
Yeah, I was searching in the on your website earlier, and there's just so much there. And also, how does it work? Obviously, with our space, with prints and multiples, an artist would create a limited edition amount of prints, which, if it's something from the 1960s, you're going to get some that might have experienced poor condition over the years. Whereas with photography, it seems that, are you printing them for clients depending on what their needs are, the size, etc.?
Well, every photographer is different. So we work with each photographer, each archive, and we advise in terms of how they should be releasing their work in editions. Because, as you know, integrity is everything in the business. And so we want to make sure that the photographers are doing the best thing for them as well as legacy. So most photographers will release their works in a few different sizes, in edition numbers, that are either
Mhm.
signed and numbered on the front, or signed and numbered on reverse. Now, a good collector will always ask for a certificate of authenticity. And I always recommend, with that certificate, is to just put it in an envelope and tape it to the back of the frame, so you don't lose it. You don't want to lose that provenance. Where did you buy it? Who it came from? What's the source? And yeah, like I said, every photographer is different, and we work with photographers who do small editions of 7. We work with photographers who do larger editions of 50. So each photographer will have their own sort of model of working.
Yeah. Yeah, at an event that you guys ran a few months ago, I actually bought 2 A4 signed photographs. One of them was the Moriarty photograph of Amy Winehouse, and another one was Kate Moss, but the name of the photographer escapes me now. It's the
Greg Brennan.
Yes, with the
Yeah.
fur coat on. But yeah,
Yes.
like you said, there's a really lovely. I think they were over £100 each, but
Yeah, the choice is there. Is
yeah.
both of those photographers, they're just on they're on the starting block of establishing themselves in the fine art sales world. So what
Mm.
they wanted to do was to have something a little bit more mass market, if you will, still of quality, signed, um, but at a more affordable, reasonable price. Because both of those photographers were getting approached by a lot of students
Mm.
who
Yeah.
could not afford, £1,000, 2,000. That entry level price, it's up there. So they were able to do something a little bit more affordable for a different market, and that's a wonderful entryway. You take that great print, you put a gorgeous mat on it, you get it framed properly. You're looking at a wonderful piece of a nice size that will fit in just about every home. And it's a that is a collector's edition as well.
Yeah, exactly. And those two, to me, are two very iconic images, which is why I
Yeah,
just love to hold on to them forever.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think maybe if we go on to kind of defining what icon means, obviously we've spoken a little bit already about what it means in terms of photography, but what do you think makes an image more iconic? Is it the subject matter at hand, or the photographer or artist's approach to that subject matter?
I think that it's a tricky question, and I don't think there's an answer. And I think everyone will have a different answer.
Mm.
What is iconic to me will be different from what is iconic to you. And we have wonderful clients who come in looking for something very specific. And then we have clients who come in who are looking for a specific photographer.
Mm.
So there are people who collect, their heroes, or they collect a date or a city, or they
Mm.
only want still life or landscape. And then we have people who only want live rock and roll. And then we have the ones who only want Terry O'Neill or only want, Eva Serini. So, yeah, so there is no real true definition of iconic. I think iconic is a very personal word. And I think
Yeah.
we just, that, and certainly, when a celebrity walks down the red carpet and they're yelling out, oh my God, her dress is so iconic. I think iconic does take time as well. I think
Yeah.
something not immediately iconic. I think it needs to stand the test of time.
I guess it's similar to like the people that Warhol might have had in the factory, things like that. They don't stand the test of time, but perhaps that's what makes an icon.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think so. And I think, in terms of Warhol, I think people buy Warhol. They buy, they're not necessarily thinking, oh, I want the Candy Darling. I want Jackie Curtis. No, I think they're, that is where Warhol, that collector, I think, is going for the Warhol.
Yeah, definitely. And they'll, again, as we were saying with photography, a Warhol collector will maybe have a specific series in mind that becomes their thing. So
Yeah.
Andy Warhol had series, they'll think, okay, I've got to collect all of those, or something like the endangered species. And I guess it's similar. Do you have that in photography where there'll be specific series by a photographer that you'll get collectors going, I need all of those?
Yes, I mean, and I think we do get collectors who come in who want a certain time and place. They want the photos from the gig that changed their life, or they want photos of the director who made them want to be in the movie business.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I think we get a lot of people who are buying imagery of the people that made them who they are. And I think, because we've grown up, I think any like-minded individual, especially those who are interested in the arts, grew up in the arts, grew up loving the arts, and whether that be television or music or theater or movies.
Yeah,
And I
and
have
that's
a real attraction to that.
yeah, we always say that that's the best way to collect here. Obviously people will buy artworks and I'm sure photographs very soon from like an investment perspective. But at the end of the day, it always has to be about buying what you love.
You
And I
have
think
to. You got to look
yeah,
at it.
yeah. And there's no better way to do that than I think that's a really lovely thing about photography is you have clients who, want to have specific moments that are very personal to them.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. And I think, I've seen a lot of gifts recently as well. A wonderful story recently is a father came in and wanted to buy a graduation gift for their daughter, I think, and wanted to buy a photo of Audrey Hepburn for his daughter because they kind of she grew up loving Audrey Hepburn movies that they would watch together. So that photo, it has so many different meanings. I mean, it's a beautiful photo. It's an important photo. It's Audrey Hepburn, but it has a real personal meaning behind the buyer and the receiver.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
And are you involved at all in kind of the curatorial process at the Physical Iconic Images Gallery?
Yeah, that's pretty much my gig in many ways. So I kind of look at all the archives and sort of, not only for the exhibitions that we do at the physical gallery, but I also try to assist in the investigating,
Mm.
what else is there.
Given the breadth of the archive itself, how do you then pick, I don't know, like 40 photographs to sit in the gallery? What is the criteria that you're looking for?
Oh, no, I think it's just a lot of, checking a lot of different boxes and a sense of balance and do they look right together and presentation. You've got to have a little bit of an eye towards the market, the commercial availability, what's going on in the zeitgeist, what are people asking for, what are people looking for, and then you sneak in your favorites when you can, and you try to, I know everyone would love this if they could just see it.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be that wonderful discovery opportunity that we have as well. And it is showcasing. It is like, I know you know this, but look at that.
Mm.
That's the beauty, is when we're able to present an image for the first time as fine art, because of the access we have, especially with Terry O'Neill, Norman Parkinson, etc. It's a great gift to be able to go through those archives.
Yeah, and I imagine that you are releasing or showing a lot of new images to the world. I mean, I've seen the Vogue archive that
Yes.
you guys have, and the amount of things that nobody has ever seen before is incredible. Versus,
Oh,
on the art
always.
market, we have a lot now, which is very heavily documented online as well. Whereas I think for photography, that journey's only just beginning.
Right, right. I mean, we're working on a new book with Garrett Mankiewicz on his Rolling Stones photos.
Oh,
And
amazing.
it's amazing. And at first we're like, oh, there's not enough. There's no way there's enough unseen. But sure enough, you start looking, you're like, I've never seen that. I've never seen that. I've never seen that. And it is the gift that kind of keeps on giving. And, being able to present work in some form. I mean, you alluded to in the beginning, is that Iconic just doesn't do the fine art. Um, we have a thriving editorial business, publishing program, licensing, merchandising. We work with interior designers, art brokers, private collectors. I mean, like I said, it's such a wonderful thing when people discover us, because we can really help them curate to their dreams, and whether that be in a book project or an apartment or their amazing new house that that they're just about to move into, statement pieces for their new living rooms or bedrooms, to documentaries. I love working with the documentary teams, because what you can tell in these amazing photos, again, not just the one but everything else surrounding it, especially the film set photography.
Mm,
Because when Terry O'Neill was on the sets of films, he would just take photo, take photo, take photo. So you see Michael Caine, but you haven't seen all the role of the directors, the other actors, the producers, the script
yeah.
writers, all the other activities behind the scene that Terry caught. And that's what you can do in a book or documentary.
For sure. And I
Mhm.
also saw an article on your website about Lawrence Freed, who used to
Yes,
photograph with Paul. And again, like if you were taking photographs inside of a film studio, taking photos of Andy Warhol producing these screen prints, that's like
it's
capturing
important.
the artwork and seeing his process.
Yes. Well, that's when you start going into the historical, relevance of photography documented in many
Mm,
ways. Great artists at work, great political figures on stage, protest movements. I mean, we don't represent Steve Shapiro, but the his work on the civil rights in the 1960s, that is ingrained in our memory. That is how we visually recall those moments, is through the work of great photographers like Steve Shapiro.
mm,
And I think that's that has a lot to be said in terms of the importance. I know we talk a little bit more about celebrity, and that's all kind of fun and games, but we haven't even touched, and that's a whole nother conversation. Great political photography, war photography,
mm,
documenting how people live.
yeah.
There were TV cameras running around in the 1950s, but there were photographers who was able to document tenement buildings, the Great Depression,
Mm,
war, Exodus, migrants arriving to come to countries. That sort of importance of photography is that's nothing to be sneezed at.
Yeah, definitely. And also the sense of immediacy
Mm,
versus, an artist at work. I think even though we already, said about picking the final photograph, but being able to capture those moments as they were happening as well.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the fun of the business, isn't it? Because, you know, the conversation surrounding photography, um, we need to talk about photography. We need to talk about photography more, and the art of photography. And that's, we've been talking a little bit more perhaps about, kind of the more celebrity iconic, but we haven't even touched art photography and the great photographers like a Cindy Sherman or Nan Golden and these,
Of
you know,
course. Yeah. Even like the Polaroids by Warhol himself, so many of our artists forayed into it, and David Hockney as well.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
fine art, the traditional fine artists are going into photography as well. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. From the position of your like collector base, I'm just wondering, do you get people who are asking for you to kit out their entire houses, as you were saying?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, and we work with those clients in terms of just better understanding, well, what do they want? Like, what's the vibe? Like, what do you want to achieve in your collection? And
Mm,
that's quite fun, to kind of get to know somebody and say, you know what? I think you'll like this, you'll like that, you'll like that. And then you
yeah,
start talking about the stories behind the photography, and then suddenly it just all comes to life, and like, why was that photo taken, who took it, what was the circumstances of them being there, and then you put it on the wall and you can look at it and think.
I'm also wondering if you have conversations with collectors about if they have a pre-existing art collection, kind of marrying photographs to that existing collection, how that works.
Yeah, and you want to help supplement a collection and round it out as well. I mean,
Mhm.
I know a lot of collectors who maybe just want one thing and one thing only. But then you've got a lot of, collectors who are looking for more of a well-rounded collection, so they can show you, these are my, hand-signed Terry O'Neills,
Mm.
and these are my, paintings from Hockney.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess a question for you personally, what's your piece de resistance in terms of an iconic image? Do you have any particular favorites, things that you love to display?
It changes every day. It
Yeah,
really, and it's a lot to do with what I'm doing, what I'm reading, what I'm looking at, what I'm listening to. And then today it's a portrait of Vivienne Westwood. Tomorrow it's going to be Joy Division on stage. Do you
yeah,
know? Like, it's just what's the vibe, And I mean, I've got wonderful pieces, and I'm lucky to have the pieces I have, and each one just means something different to me. And it's I didn't want it because I loved that individual, but I loved Jean Shrimpton walking down the street just as such a it was just such a swag and a vibe about that moment. And she's barefoot and it was raining. And then I have Liza Minnelli, sitting with champagne and her cigarettes and her, just arms crossed with her sunglasses on. It's just, just every image is there's just some joy to it. I mean, I have a lot of friends who love David Bowie. And so there's
mm,
been, such a surge in collecting David Bowie photography because it just changed so much. So we have people who only want 1973. I've got people who only want 1984. So,
mm.
I think it's personal. Art is personal, and it should be. And especially for collectors, I think going back to what you said in the beginning is follow your heart.
Exactly. Yeah. And for your personal collection, it sounds like you've got quite a lot of photographs yourself. Do you present them all in your space, or do you have your own mini carry archive?
I have a little archive, and I kind of flip them around, so I kind of, today this is up, tomorrow that's up, sort of thing, and I kind of switch it around a bit. And I like, there's a lot of, uh, yeah, I have some strange ones. I have ones that I forgot that I bought, and it's a lot of, it's whether it be auctions or galleries or, fundraisers. Like Dan Golden is a great example. Does a lot of selling of smaller prints for fundraising campaigns. And I might not ever be able to afford a big Nan Golden, but I've got a few little ones that together work, and it's wonderful to have a few signed Nan Goldens in the collection. So yeah, I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to present things as well, kind of pick your favorite of the day, I
Yeah,
suppose.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, what is the world like at auction for photographs?
It is a growing market within the auction market because people are seeing the resale value. So
Yeah,
the auction world, they also want to cater to, a large consumer base, whether it be a beginning collector, a seasoned collector, or someone who wants to supplement. A man can't live on oil paintings alone.
yeah, exactly. And that's where, you with photography and we with prints and editions come in as well. Being able to, buy amazing works of art at a more accessible price point a lot of the time as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's really exciting.
Hmm.
There's so much.
It's so much. I mean, it is personal. I think it is, does it stand the test of time? And you look at something from 1950 or 1971 or 1989, and still, it still means something to you. It still moves you. It still evokes some emotion out of you. Then that's iconic.
Yeah. As for the future, do you see any future icons coming up?
Well, I hope so. And I think that, I hope that the icons today, that the ones that we know, I hope they realize that they need to a bit let their guard down, let the photographers in, let the artist do their work, and stop trying to direct and over Photoshop and over manipulate what they look like, because they're going to lose a legacy.
Yeah, I guess that is something that's kind of taken over in the world of photography, especially,
Mm.
but also in the art world itself, with so many commercial galleries, dealers, the commercial aspect almost killing it in a way. But hopefully not the case.
No, I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that came into mind over what makes an image iconic, what has been the role, do you think, of social media in this? Because we've definitely seen that in terms of art history. But I think it's perhaps even more poignant for photography.
I think with iPhones and platforms, anybody thinks they can be a photographer.
Mm.
And I think that's democratic, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, there's some great work happening on Instagram. Don't get me wrong by that, but it's to be a great photographer takes time and skill, education, learning from the ones that came before, and studying the craft. It's not a point and shoot business. If it was point and shoot, we wouldn't have a giant gallery in the middle of central London,
Mm.
because there'd be no need for it. Everybody would be doing it. um, I think that the good thing about Instagram is that it is a way to reach many people at once and showcase work, and whether that's showcasing historic work or showcasing new work or galleries. I mean, it is something as a promotional tool, and the ability to kind of tell the story behind the imagery. And then sometimes, when we post a photo, somebody will come out and say, "Oh, I was the assistant on that shoot,"
Mm.
or "I was I was at the magazine when that was commissioned." So we even get the ability to connect to people who were there, who were, or I was at that show.
Yeah.
Or even old assistants, "Oh, I worked with Terry in 1968." And
Yeah.
that's a wonderful thing, to use it more as I want to say, using it as a connecting tool.
Mm. I think
Um,
that's one of the ways that Terence uses it really well. He's got what's the account called? Model Lives in Fashion.
yes.
And that again, anybody who's listening should follow this account. It's incredible. But you'll have the photograph, many of which I've never seen before, or even if you have seen it before, the caption will give you a really eloquent story of who's in it, what moment that's capturing, who's the photographer, who was involved in that shoot. And I think that's one of the really lovely ways that social media has kind of come together to become almost a storytelling platform for photographers.
Well, and also filling in some of the gaps. Like I know Terrence loves finding out the names of the models.
Yeah.
And he can do that sometimes on social media. Well, he'll put a call out and he'll put a photo up from the 1950s and say, does anybody know who was the model on this? You know, because back in the day, a lot of models were never identified.
Mm.
You know, so it's filling in that gap, filling in historic information.
And I think it's really exciting for photography, especially because the history of art has spanned back centuries. And while photography has also been around for centuries, it feels like this kind of iconic level of photography that we're speaking about today has only really been something that has developed over the past 100, 200 years. So it's really exciting where it's in its infancy in a way to see that fast rate of development.
Well, there, you know, and I think that what's really interesting about photography is that, you know, like we were saying earlier, behind every photo is going to be a lot more. And Terrence, you know, I know we're talking, it's like a Terrence Pepper podcast now, but he said, well, it's unseen for a reason.
Yeah.
Which I always think about. I keep that in the back of my head. I'm like, was this unseen for a reason?
Yeah. Do you ever get people requesting to buy contact sheets and things like that?
Yeah, we do, and we love creating contact sheets. You know, we just try to straighten them up and clean them up a bit, because you really see the progression. You know, you see a little bit of a journey of somebody or a journey of a moment, and whether that's Muhammad Ali in the ring, or David Bowie on stage, or a portrait session with Jimi Hendrix. You know, you kind of see, you know, one of our most popular contact sheets that's at the gallery now is this big, amazing contact sheet of David Bowie Diamond Dogs.
Yeah.
With a big dog jumping up on the camera.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of see the contact where the dog is like on the ground, looking one way, leaping at the camera, and then finally the shot everybody knows of the dog leaping towards the strobe light.
Yeah.
Wonderful series of imagery.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite photographs, actually.
And then in the gallery as well, we have this great contact sheet original that we found in Terry O'Neill's archive, where David Bowie selected the image he liked and initialed it, you know, right there and then on the contact sheet.
Yeah. And I guess that is it is so cool, and it's one of the best things about being either an art history lover or a collector, being able to find through people like you and us, being able to like find these different moments of history and being able to piece together the puzzle, especially through things like contact sheets that show you the progression journey of an artwork.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, you know, it's the two different roles with photography, because, you know, you need to respect what the photographer would have wanted. You know, you do have a responsibility there. And then on the opposite side, for the living photographers we work with, it's working hand in hand with those photographers, advising and just, you know, trying to work with them as best to our ability to go through their archives and make recommendations.
Yeah. And print certain photographs that haven't been printed before. Yeah.
Yeah, and we get a lot of like, oh, no one will want that.
Yeah. Yes, that's exciting. You're in a decision-making role there to decide, you know, what could be iconic.
Well, what do we think would somebody think is iconic?
Yeah.
You know, it's trying to look at a photo through many different ways, through many different lenses. You know, will it work in a book? Will it work on screen? Will it work on a t-shirt? Will it work in your home? You know, which way will this photograph go?
Do you have a lot of calls for merchandise and things, so things being on t-shirts?
Yeah, and it's definitely an area, you know, we'd love to grow and get more, you know, get more people over here to start looking through our amazing archives because you know, some great designers, you know, J.W. Anderson coming to mind right away, you know, are such advocates and proponents of photography. So, you know, when we have the opportunities to collaborate with these great brands, you know, again, it brings a new audience to that work.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's you know, Supreme did a terrific collaboration with Nan Golden. You know, I wore my jacket out.
Yeah. And I guess that is where the future of these things lies as well, bringing it to like ever larger audiences.
Well, I hope so. I mean, you know, I know that there's some people who kind of sniffle a bit at the Keith Haring, you know, oversaturation perhaps. But I love it. You know, I love seeing kids wearing Keith Haring.
Yeah. We
You know,
we did a podcast about this last week about the burgeoning market for these artist products. And I can definitely see photography going in a similar direction, but I'm all for it. I think it's exciting being
I'm
able to wear.
excited if it's, you know, I mean, hey, listen, like I said, I can't afford to buy an Ann Golden, right? But can I
Yeah,
buy the jacket? Yeah, I bought the jacket.
yeah. And is there any better way to experience that art than to wear it on your body as well? It's the
No,
most fun.
I remember I was in Chelsea and I had the jacket on, and a woman stopped me, and she's like, "Oh, you know, where'd you get your jacket?" Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Oh, it's Supreme, etc." She's like, I've got that photo in my house." I'm like, "Are
Oh,
you all right?" I'm like,
oh,
"God, you know, but fabulous,
the ultimate
fabulous."
envy in a way, but
Right.
yeah,
I mean, she was, you know, she's a photography collector. She loves the work. And she's like, I didn't realize they were doing this. And I'm like, you're so lucky to have it. You are, I mean, you know, I hope you know how lucky you are. And
yeah,
that you just don't like blink when you walk by it and think, oh, I shouldn't have bought that. Like, you own that. That's cool. That's cool.
yeah. But it's so amazing that you were wearing that jacket, and I see the same thing with art in creating these shared lovely experiences between people. Like if you hadn't been wearing that jacket, you never would have gotten to know this woman and heard her story about this photograph.
Yeah.
And that's the
I
lovely
mean, we
thing
both
about.
had a laugh, you know. I mean, it was just such a lovely thing. And I have stopped people on the street if I see somebody, you know, with a book I've worked on, or, you know, if they have a T-shirt or something, I'm like, you know, where'd you get that? I mean, it is a way to engage and to start a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the books that you've worked on, has there been a particular photographer or celebrity that the book's been about that's been your favorite to work on, in the
And
sense of like, I love these photographs?
Um, you know, it's hard to have a favorite, isn't it? Because it's every book is your favorite when you're, especially when you're in the middle of it, or you're at the publication party like last night with Willie Christie. You know, we've got some great books coming up, but you know, I loved working on Kevin Cummins' books because he's such a perfectionist, and he's got such a high standard of production and quality and design. So I learn a lot by working with him. And then I take that learning and I apply it elsewhere. Peter Fetterman, the great gallerist in Santa Monica, did a book last year called The Power of Photography, where it was his, you know, his photos that he loved and the stories behind why he loves these photos. I mean, it's a masterclass. I mean, the book it is literally a masterclass in photography, and I recommend it to everybody because it's photography 101. You're going to
Amazing.
see the masters up until the more recent photographers. It is a terrific book. It's called The Power of Photography.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of it. I'll have to
It's
look at.
fabulous. You'll love it. We've got it at the gallery. Um,
Yeah.
but it's based on Peter Fetterman's passion, and he's been running his gallery for many decades now, and he's probably one of the most, if not the most important photography advocate, collector, reseller, gallerists, curators around. And he's got an eye.
Yeah.
He will pick what he wants to pick.
Yeah.
And that's a
And
joy.
and I think publications and discourse around that is ever more important now. You know, we're living in this era of AI and, you know, people making photographs at the touch of a button, works of art at the touch of a button. But I guess everything that we've spoken about today of what makes an image iconic is why those arts have to and will be preserved.
Yeah. No, exactly. And not everything, you know, will be. And there will be things that go missing and things that you know, the whole Pauline Bodie rediscovery that's going on right now. It's exciting, you know. So there will
Yeah.
always be people that we don't know exist until we know. And that holds true for art as well as photography.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining
Oh,
me. I think
oh my God, we could talk for ages. But
I know.
you know, visit the gallery, you know. I mean, tell all your friends. It's you know, as I say, it's minutes from Piccadilly Circus, so easy to get to. But it's a great gallery and a great way to experience wonderful art.
And how does it work if can members of the public view the archive?
Yeah, of course. Come on in.
Amazing. But I
Yeah.
would strongly recommend to any fan of photography, go and see the archive because it's incredible.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It was great to speak to you.